In the previous lesson, we compared strings to one another. So we had a username string which we compared with the system username, and we had a password string which we compared with the system password string. Now we're going to create an app that demonstrates how to compare numbers. What we're going to do specifically is we're going to create an app that allows the user or asks the user to type in two numbers, and then it will tell the user which of the two numbers is bigger. Now we can do this. We start off by creating an integer variable. We'll call it num1, and we're going to use the J option panes show input dialog. And we type in there, please enter a number. Alright, now as we saw before, this whatever is being returned here is of type string, so we need to convert it to an integer, and we convert it using the integer dot parseInt method. And remember, if we are opening a bracket there, we need to close it at the end. So in other words, whatever is coming back, whatever the user is typing into the input dialog box must first be converted to an integer and then stored into the integer variable num1. Okay, let's copy this line and then we'll paste it for the second number. Alright, let's change this. Okay, so please enter a number, and then it asks for a second number. Now how do we compare numbers? Now comparing numbers is somewhat simpler than comparing strings, because we don't use the equals method. So we compare numbers like this. If num1 is greater than num2, so we use the greater than sign. Now this is to check if one is greater than the other. There's lots of other operators that we can use. For example, to check if there is equality between the two, we use the equals, the double equals. Now remember, this is critically important to understand. We do not use a single equals. A single equals means assignment. It means num2 will be assigned to num1, meaning whatever the value that's stored in num2 will be assigned to whatever is in num1. So we use the double equals. The double equals is for comparison. This checks, is num1 equal to num2? Alright, but in this case we're going to use the greater than. So we got the greater than, we also got the less than. Then we can use the less than or equals to, but this time we'll just go to greater than. So if num1 is greater than num2, so we output num1. So the J option pane show message dialog will output num1, or we can make it something a little more descriptive. We could say num1 plus is greater, and we close the double quotes, and then we put our else scenario. Now what will be the else scenario? What will happen? In what cases will it come to else? That's if num1 is actually less than num2. So if num1 is equal to or less than num2, well, not equal to but less than num2, then it will output let's fix that up. Num2 is greater. Perfect. Now we can save our code. We can see it saves as compare numbers, and compile it. Alright, it compiled perfectly without any issues. Let's run it. Alright, let's enter two numbers. Let's enter 8 and 3. 8 is greater. Fantastic. Let's try it again. Let's put the smaller number first. 4, 12. 12 is greater. Perfect. So in both scenarios it shows us the correct number. But let's try a third scenario. And this scenario is when the two numbers are equal, what happens? So I put a 7 and a 7. Now this is incorrect. 7 is greater than 7. Impossible. Alright. So why is this happening? Why is it saying 7 is greater? Now if we look at our code, we'll see exactly why this is happening. We are checking if num1 is greater than num2. So let's put in the 7s. Let's substitute the 7s in there. If 7 is greater than 7. Is 7 greater than 7? No. Hence this statement will be false. If this statement is false, automatically Java will run the next statement, which will output 7 is greater, which is not actually what we wanted. So how do we fix this? The way to fix this is to first check if num1 and num2 are equal. If they aren't equal, then and only then will it check if one is greater than the other. Alright, so how do we do that? Now we can do that using what we call a nested if statement, where we have one if statement inside of another if statement. So what we're going to do is we're going to put an outer if statement, and we'll say if num1 is equal to num2, alright, we'll just put in the open parenthesis, and we'll put a J option pane, that's a show message dialog that simply states that the two numbers are equal. Alright, so that's what is going to output, but now our program is incomplete because there's a missing parenthesis, a missing curly brace rather. So if num1 is equal to num2, output that. Alright, and we close the curly brace. So the closed curly brace belongs to that one. So these two are a pair, and we can test them by simply hovering over them as I'm doing. Right, and this one belongs to the main method and this one belongs to the class. So let's look at it again. If num1 is equal to num2, then output that, else, and then we put a curly brace there. Alright, now take a look at this. The else will encompass the next if statement, which begins there and ends there with its else. When I indent this code, it'll make more sense. So I select this and I indent it. Now it makes more sense, and you can also see why we programmers insist on indenting text. It just makes it, or indenting our lines of code, it just makes it much easier to read. So let's look at this code again. Firstly, it does a comparison. Is num1 equal to num2? Yes. Then it outputs the two numbers are equal. Else, in the fail scenario, that means num1 and num2 are not equal. What it does is it does another check. If num1 is greater than num2, then output num1 is greater, else num2 is greater. Let's compile this code now, and hopefully there won't be any issues. And there was an issue. Alright, let's look at the issue. Compare numbers, line 9. Let's call up the line numbers. Very good. Error, cannot find symbol. J option. That was a silly mistake. It's supposed to say J option pane like the others. Alright, let's compile again. Now it's perfectly normal. It's perfectly normal to get issues in your code. Alright, so it seems we cleaned everything up. Let's run it. Now we're going to try it with 3 scenarios. The first scenario is both numbers are equal. Perfect, the 2 numbers are equal. Let's run it again. Alright, so we put the bigger number first, 8 and 3. 8 is greater. Perfect. And finally, it always pays to test every possible scenario. So we put the smaller number first, and 7 is greater. So in this lesson, you actually learned quite a few things. One is the different types of comparison operators that you get with numbers, that you can use with numbers. And you also learned how to use a nested if statement, one if statement that lives inside another one.